Once again, this is The Life of the Mind, and I'm Hank Pattison. It is Monday, November 16th, 2015, and what are we thinking about today? Well, today, just a little while ago, I was thinking to myself, it's so weird that the Jedi had no problem with human slavery, and really the Empire seemed to not. I was looking into it, and I was looking about how in the Phantom Menace, their whole thing is sort of kicked off because there's a trade blockade around Naboo. And I was like, well, how come they don't put a trade blockade around that planet that Anakin and Luke Skywalker are from, Tatooine? Like, how come the Jedi just wander around there and people are living and dying in slavery? This is not even getting into the whole concept as to whether or not droids, which seem to be sentient feeling beings, if it's okay to put them into slavery. I mean, that's a whole thing unto itself. The clones, sending clones into war. When you really look at the context of what Star Wars is about, there's some really weird, big, disturbing stuff. In the hands of another author, I think Star Wars would wind up looking a lot more like Game of Thrones. Like, you would realize how brutal and horrible everybody's lives are. It's not fun. It's not little kids telling jokes and getting to go on speed racing adventures. Like, it's people born into slavery. I'm trying to imagine what the life of a clone in the clone army would be like. You're just grown in a tank and then given a gun and sent out to die. I wonder if they like manipulate their brains. There's probably information on this online in the extended universe, which I don't really consider canon. If it's not in the movies, it's not canon. I think that's basically my outlook on it. I know there's the TV shows, I know there's the comics, but when they're making the movies, I don't think they spend a lot of time looking at the comics and the cartoons thinking, oh, how can we make all this stuff line up? They don't give a fuck about any of that, the people who make the movies. And the movies are what Star Wars is. I'm normally not really a big Star Wars guy. I was too young for it when it first came out, and I was too old for it when it sort of had a chance to cycle with me. And I always say, like, I read a lot of heavy metal magazines, and I don't know, I was born in 1978. I remember seeing a lot of R-rated movies in the 80s. It's just the way the world was. You saw stuff like Predator and Terminator. Even if you don't really remember them as little kids, like, I don't know, you were just exposed to it. It wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, it was exciting, and those movies were awesome, so it was a big deal. But it wasn't like people were freaking out about it. And it's also, I don't know, I kind of want to say it's not the same thing as if you were sitting around watching Saw today, but who knows? I haven't really seen those movies. I think one of my younger siblings has, and they probably saw it when they were really young, and they probably don't care either. So, what's my point? My point is by the time I got a chance to see Star Wars, I was really into Robert Rodriguez movies, and I was really into Tarantino movies, and when I watched Star Wars, I was like, well, this isn't cool. This is sort of weird, childish fantasy. And, you know, since then, I've evolved a little bit. I think I spent a bunch of time listening. I don't know if you're familiar with Red Letter Media. Red Letter Media is a YouTube channel, and on it, a guy does... They're sort of satirical reviews of the original Star Wars movies, but they're not satirical. The tone is satirical, but the content is really intelligent. Anyways, watching his reviews gave me a whole new appreciation for the movies, and I understand that as far as fantasy movies go, they're really well-crafted universes. At least the original trilogy was. The second trilogy, I think it's awesome to study the second trilogy because it'll teach you a lot about marketing and sociology and just sort of where people's brains are at compared to where they were 20 or 30 years ago. I think there's a lot to learn from Star Wars. And I think it succeeded with an audience that people It succeeded with a very non-vocal audience, which is to say 5 to 12-year-olds. And I think it was really important that it succeed with that audience more than it succeed with the current audience. I think the next Star Wars movies, I think that's an aspect to what they're doing. I think they know they got to use a really broad stroke and get as many people types as they can. But the younger, the better, without alienating old people. My point from earlier is that I just never had a chance to really make Star Wars my thing, and then nerd culture really sank its fangs into it. And, I decided to become an edgy outsider, like Wolverine and the X-Men. And I chose not to fall in love with the things that I was being told to fall in love with. And I really, being a part of geek culture, Star Wars is just crammed down your throat. Like, people are just jumping at the chance to tell you that they're the greatest movies ever made. And I don't think they're the greatest movies ever made. I think there's some really good storytelling features in them. I think there's some really good set design. There's a handful of decent performances, but I mean, I don't know. I'm never in a hurry to go watch the Star Wars trilogy. I feel about the same way as I do about the Lord of the Rings trilogy, which is to say not a lot. Not really my bag, man. Not really my thing. I think this gets back to something I was talking about before, and the whole concept that I can see that art is good without having to like it. And I can see the Star Wars movies are good. I just, whatever. I mean, sure, I'd like to have a lightsaber, but I don't feel like that has a lot to do with Star Wars. I think the idea of a glowing or flaming sword is a somewhat primal image that a lot of people can relate to, or that just would be super badass. Kind of reminds me of another little conversation I was having. Let's take a break for a couple of moments. No, let's not take a break for a couple of moments. Let's not. Let's just keep on plugging through here. What was I talking about? I was talking to my buddy Dan, and we were talking. Well, I was trying to force him to talk with me about Ghost Rider and Iron Fist. Those are very two incongruent things. Comparing Ghost Rider and Iron Fist, my God. Iron Fist. Comparing Ghost Rider and Iron Fist is sort of like comparing like apples and tangerines. One is not a reflection of the other. It's not an either or situation. I could see an argument being made for like, oh, it's either Batman or it's Captain America, or it's, I don't know, Flash or even Green Lantern. But I mean, anyway, my argument, we were talking about who should be adapted into a Netflix series. And I was really pushing that I'm very pro Ghost Rider. I can't really point at a lot of Ghost Rider comics that I actually like, but what I love is the image of a dude with a flaming skull who wears a leather jacket and has like glowing metal chains and rides a motorbike where the tires are on fire and just goes around fucking people up. I really like that idea. I think maybe one of the huge mistakes was to make Ghost Rider a hero. Maybe Ghost Rider would be a much better villain. Maybe if that was a dude who like Spider-Man had to battle. I don't know. I just think it's cool, man. I just think things on fire are cool. And a dude whose head is on fire is cool. But a dude whose head is a skull which is on fire, that's even cooler. And I mean cooler in a very like 13-year-old boy getting his ear pierced and saying things are fucking rad. That kind of cool. It's very juvenile cool, but I mean, those boys grow up into men who get stupid tattoos, and I mean, all tattoos are stupid. I say that as somebody with several tattoos, and they're just nerd. They're just nerd stuff. Everything's just nerd stuff. Everybody's just a nerd deep down inside. I don't care how big and tough you are. You can be some military dude with your military tattoo. And you know what? You're still just a nerd. You're still just a nerd. I'm going to get punched by a military guy when I leave my house today. No, I mean, it's cool, man. I mean, everybody's a nerd. It's a great unifier. And Anybody who loves something. Man, are you religious? That's so nerdy. Believing in stuff. Caring about people. People with families. Oh, those people are the worst nerds. I think maybe I'm turning nerd into my current smurf. I'm just going to reuse it and overuse it so much that it loses all meaning. There's a little baby crying out in my front yard, which is weird. The microphone won't pick it up, but... oh God, I hope it's not lost. So anyways, Ghost Rider is super nerdy, and he's super cool, and that's allowable. Things are allowed to be super nerdy and super cool. And I think a Ghost Rider TV series would be badass. Now, I'm of course imagining an R-rated Ghost Rider TV series. I see it as being a little bit like that show Supernatural, where the two brothers drive cross-country beating up vampires and werewolves and crap like that. I think it would be a lot like that. It would be sort of a road movie thing where Johnny Blaze, I don't know, maybe he used to be a stunt cyclist and now he just roams around having adventures. Or maybe he's still a stunt cyclist and that's like a cover for him traveling around. And then you have, it sort of depends as to whether or not you want more of a static cast. Because if it's just him traveling around, then it's a totally new adventure every time. But if he's traveling with sort of a circus or something like that, then you can sort of have an actual cast of people you're going to see regularly. I like both of those shows. I'm very content with both of those shows. What else would it be like? I had a couple of real comparisons. I think yesterday I had a real like, oh man, a Ghost Rider TV series, that would be like X plus X. It would be so cool. Yeah, a little like Supernatural. What are some other elements you would have in it? I mean, it's about a dude and his head's on fire and he fights evil people and evil things. I mean, one of those nebulous middle moral grounds. I kind of like the idea. I don't know how other people feel about this. I mean, everybody tells their own Ghost Rider stories. I like the idea that Ghost Rider doesn't intentionally kill people. That his ultimate goal is to use his, what is it? Penance stare? Something like that. It's a thing, and I think they invented it in the 90s, where if Ghost Rider looks into your eyes, he can make you see and feel all the terrible things you've done in your life, and anything that you deep down inside feel guilty about, anything that you blame yourself for, he'll bring that out to the surface and sort of cripple you emotionally, which is a fascinating idea on a whole bunch of different levels. Just the idea that you can be in a fight with like a bunch of evil crack dealing bikers or something, and in the middle of it make one of them oh, why did you stop fighting him? Because your arms and legs were broken or because you were knocked unconscious? No, because I couldn't stop remembering how much I disappointed my mom, and I cried until the cops came and arrested me. I like the idea that I think Grant Morrison did this with Professor X, that anytime somebody messed with Professor X, their lives were irrevocably changed. That Professor X would open up their minds, not in a hostile way, but he would just show them a connecting form of empathy that would change them on a fundamental level. And I like the idea that with Ghost Rider, you have this horrible force of nature, but at the same time, every time he encounters somebody, they theoretically come away from that situation a better person. A better person who might have broken arms and legs, and a better person who might be emotionally shattered. Like, he is really messing these people up, but he's also forcing them to deal with it. So there's a bit of a like from the prison cell or the prison hospital, those guys are going to wind up calling their moms to apologize, or like calling up their ex-wife to say of like, oh my God, I realized I did this thing. I think that would be an amazing TV show. I think I'm not selling it very well at this point. I think so far what I've described sounds really boring, but I mean, I think it's that again, the main character is this, I don't know, he sort of seems like a criminal. Maybe he kind of partially is a criminal. He's just traveling around, but he's looking for really bad people and manifestations of hell or black magic, or I shouldn't say black magic. That sounds really tacky and stupid. But just like evil magic. Yeah. So he'd then battle like, wizards and goblins and crap like that, and like, I don't know, evil construction workers. And like maybe he'd just go where there was trouble. Like he'd just read newspapers and be like, oh man, it looks like some demon is fucking people up in Chicago. I guess it's time for me to go to Chicago and fuck some people up. That'd be cool. I could dig that. Then he'd go to Chicago and meet some people. He'd sort of investigate things. And the cops wouldn't like him. They'd be like, hey, why are you just coming into town investigating crimes? He'd be like, I'm just a drifter. I don't know nothing. And then nightfall would come and he'd sort of track the guys down to their lair. And then he'd turn into fucking Ghost Rider and kick in their fucking door and just Ghost Rider the fuck out of that place. Just, be a skull that's on fire and beat people up and like, yeah. It's the Incredible Hulk, except instead of a big green guy, he turns into a black leather punker whose head is a skull that's on fire, which is super cool. Like, you can't argue with that, Dan. You can't argue with that, Dan. I'm sure Dan's not going to listen to this. He gets enough of my pro Ghost Rider rants in the workplace. I'll tell you something else, though. My favorite Ghost Rider is not actually a skull that's on fire. My favorite Ghost Rider is Ghost Rider 2099, who is... He's kind of a Terminator who created a holographic flame around his skull-like Terminator head, and he rides a hover bike, and he fucks dudes up. He's got a chainsaw arm, and he's got, like, a knife arm, which I guess is kind of the same as a chainsaw arm. But anyways, he's really cool. It was a really cool comic. Ghost Rider 2099 is arguably one of my favorite comics of all time. I really wish Marvel would put it out in like even just a 12-issue collection of it would be so cool. I should figure out who I need to contact at Marvel to put in requests for graphic novels to come back into print. Dear Marvel, please bring back Ghost Rider 2099 for me. There's got to be some other people out there. I can't be the only fan of Ghost Rider 2099. Anyways, Ghost Rider 2099. Fucking cool shit. I recommend reading it. But how? Tracking down the singles on eBay? That's not a very reasonable way to go about it. Maybe somebody's got scans online you could read. That would be okay. They should really do a collection for it. We're going to take a little pause now. A real one. Something else I checked out this week was The Goddamned. The Goddamned is a new comic it's written by Jason Aaron, and it's drawned by R.M. Guerra. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right. I hope I am, because I have so much respect for this guy. His art. These guys previously did a series called Scalped together. These guys previously did a series called Scalped. They did not do a series called Scalped Together, which I think would be a really cute TV sitcom. No, they did the series Scalped, which was about a FBI agent who was undercover in a very corrupt Aboriginal reservation, native reservation, Aboriginal. They still use the word Indian quite frequently in it, because that's how people do. Anyways, what is The Goddamned? The Goddamned is... it's a biblical story, but it's biblical by way of... Am I just going to say Game of Thrones for everything now? It's the biblical Game of Thrones. It's sort of the Game of Thrones version of Smurfs. Actually, that's a really good idea. I would really actually like to write that. A Smurf Game of Thrones. Game of Smurfs, obviously, or Smurf of Thrones. Oh my god, which one of those titles is better? I mean, it could be Smurf of Smurf, but I feel like that's taking it a bit too far. Smurf of Thrones? Game of Smurf. Smurfs. Game of Smurfs. No, I think Smurf of Thrones. I think the title of my Game of Thrones Smurf story will be Smurf of Thrones. What the hell am I talking about? I'm talking about The Goddamned. It's really hard to say The Goddamned without saying Batman. Thanks, Frank Miller. The Goddamned is a biblical story it's about the time while Noah was gathering up two of everything on the planet. Very dark days, you know? I mean, that was the point where apparently God was like, fuck this shit. We are going to wash it all away. So salvage what you can. Anything you can't is going goodbye because people suck. This was during God's Bill Hicks phase. People suck. I can prove it. Fuck them. Let's just flush it all away. One of the main characters appears to be Cain, the first murderer and the son of Adam and Eve, who is incapable of dying and is just kind of walking the earth being a bad motherfucker. He don't like nobody. He don't want nothing. He just wants to die. Yeah. And the people he runs into are savage beast humans who barely have any kind of culture. They are mostly just, kind of murdering rapist hillbillies. Imagine when the entire planet was nothing but murdering, raping hillbillies. I think there's a bit of my philosophy on human life there somewhere. Not a very positive philosophy, but I think there's a philosophy in there. It's the everyone's a hillbilly philosophy. Even people who live in the city, they're just hillbillies in suits. I don't really know what I'm saying. That's very silly and makes no sense. The Goddamned is a very well written comic with some of the most beautiful artwork I have ever seen. And he is literally drawing shit covered people in some cases. And nevertheless, oh man, I mean, I wonder. I'm taking a quick click around on the internet right now while I'm talking. Oh, there we go. Colors by another name I can't say. Brusco. G. Brusco. The colors on this book are it's a really, really nice looking book. And if you like crazy, intense adult entertainment, I would highly endorse anything creator-owned that Jason Aaron has written. Scalped is absolutely incredible. Southern Bastards is my favorite comic currently coming out. And The Goddamned was one of the best single issues. One of the things Jason Aaron does really well is he tells stories which are contained to single issues, and he tells storylines that feel complete while still being part of a larger story. There are some writers I love where I hate reading their stuff in single issues because 22 pages is not long enough for them to do the character development that they want to do. So you're better off letting like 6 or maybe 25 issues pile up and then just blow through them all in a sitting, and you'll get a much more satisfying experience. Otherwise, it's a little like if every week in the newspaper they printed 2 or 3 pages of a Stephen King novel or something. Like, that's no way to enjoy it. It's too small. You want a larger dose. That's how I feel anyways. But what Jason Aaron does is he tells stories that are 1 issue long and are incredible. The Goddamned was a really good first issue. And I got to tell you, like, biblical fantasy does not hold much appeal to me. This comic is not about things that I want to read comics about, but this comic is very well written and very well drawn. And quite honestly, at the end of the day, what I really want is well written and well drawn comics. I want well made art, be it movies or any kind of entertainment like that. There are things that I'd like things to be about, but I would rather something be good and about something I don't care about than that it be mediocre about my favorite things. In fact, that's kind of what breaks my heart. Hell, I was just thinking yesterday, this makes me so sad, but like, I've been talking a lot recently, I think on this podcast, and I know to my friends in general, I've been using the term my 5 favorite movies a lot. And I kind of realized I don't know I don't know if there's any science fiction that I love. And science fiction is my favorite thing in the world. But I don't know if I can name. I can name a couple. I can name a couple. I'll give you. Okay, science fiction movies I know I love: Alien, Aliens, Terminator, Terminator 2, Blade Runner, and I think I'm starting to hit a wall at that point. Um, I know I have a little bit of a rule, and everybody feels differently. Everybody, I'm not saying my favorite movies are better than your favorite movies. They're just my favorite movies. Um, I know I have a tendency that if a movie isn't rated R, I'm not very interested in it. I felt that way for years, that no one is telling compelling stories with realistic characters for a PG rating. You just can't do it. You know, real people say motherfucker, real people have nipples and ass cracks, and they're not just jokes. They're real things. So I kind of have turned my back on PG ratings for the past. Well, I'm going to be 37 tomorrow, so let's say the past 25 years of my life. And that is something that fundamentally still hits me when I look at things like the Avengers movie or the Star Wars franchise being re-released. I mean, you know, I hope those things are good. I hope those kids' movies are good. But there's this part of me that wishes, I hope someday somebody makes a 50 or $100 million movie that's an R-rated epic sci-fi. I'd be fascinated to see, like, okay, so they did that. Fuck, I don't even know if I can remember the title of this movie. Jupiter's Ascending, the new Wachowski siblings movie that I think sort of bombed. I don't even know what the figures on it are, but it seemed like nobody could understand what it was about. Like, if it would be so interesting if they knew that movie was going to fail as it was, and then they could have said, well, would we have made more money if it had a hard R rating, and like we threw some fucking and some cursing and some real fucking like people dying in it? Maybe that would have been a more successful movie than the thing they did. It's one of those things where, like, maybe that movie would have made $80 million and people would have said, oh, it totally failed. But then if they'd known the other reality, this reality, where it only made like $20 million, they'd be like, oh, it's a massive success compared to that, though it still didn't make its money back. I'm making up all these figures, obviously. But still, I wonder. Sometimes it feels like the time for the big budget, well written, R-rated movie is gone. People don't want to make those anymore. They, which is weird because, like, the Netflix and DVD, the non-theatrical market has got to be at an all-time high. So, like, you know, at that point, like, underage people are only getting turned away from movie theaters. It's not that hard to rent an R-rated movie if you're a kid. It's not that hard to see them. I mean, I suppose a lot of people are streaming them, and then there's no way to monetize that, so it doesn't make any sense unless you can sell advertising in your movie in advance, which is what they do anyways. So I don't know. I don't know. You hope that somebody can do something good at some point. See, this is why I was always hoping that Tarantino was going to do sci-fi as a genre next. That he's done a hardcore crime, he's done hardcore war movie, he's done hardcore western movie. Like, I want to see him, like, just do something with some fucking flying cars and laser guns, Tarantino. That's all I'm asking you to do. Or like the Coen brothers. Fucking, at least I got Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright recently did, well, he didn't recently do The World's End, but he did, that's his most recent film, and that's full-on sci-fi and full-on fucking awesome, and I believe, did it have an R rating? I'm actually curious enough to check live while we're recording. The World's End. There we go. The World's End. August 23rd, 2013. Oh my God, what was I going to say about it? Well, now I don't remember. I don't remember what I was going to look up and check. I have to go back and. Oh, yeah, I was checking on the rating. I wanted to see what it was rated. It was rated R. It was a good movie, and it was rated R because good movies are rated R. Crappy movies are rated PG. This is not a universal truth. This is just the opinion that exists inside of my head. Oh, I just knocked into the microphone there. I hope you didn't get a big hearing of that. Because I'm not re-recording this point. I made my point. My point is, I like movies where people cuss. I cuss. I like to hear that represented on the screen. Yeah. So that's a lot of rambling, talking about stuff. Once again, you know what that is? That, my friend, that is the life of the mind. And I am Hank Pattison, your good friend. And I hope you have a really swell day. Later, skaters.